How are you?
Good, good. How is it?
Very good, thank you.
Very good.
Yeah.
How is Uganda?
Love it.
Yeah,
It's
we love
beautiful.
it, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you.
As you can see, encounters with police are to be expected in Uganda. This one went pretty well, however we weren't always so lucky. I'll get into that a little more later, but for now this is a few tips for driving in Uganda. One of the first things you'll notice, especially if you're from North America or much of the rest of the Western world, is that Uganda drives on the left, which also means that the steering wheel is on the right-hand side of the car. It was my third time driving on the left, so I wasn't too thrown off by it, but if you've never done it before, it may be a bit intimidating. I wouldn't let this stop you necessarily, especially if you really want to drive in Uganda, but it's worth considering that it'll take some time to get used to. Also, driving in Uganda is fairly chaotic and aggressive, so if you're already trying to learn to drive on the left and dealing with the aggressive nature of the driving, it might be a bit scary the first couple days, but you'll get used to it and eventually you'll get pretty comfortable with it. My first day of driving was in Entebbe near the airport, and we immediately headed west out of town. I'll put a map on the screen just showing the route that we drove throughout the whole country, because we covered a decent amount of ground throughout the western side of Uganda. I never drove the Entebbe-Kampala highway, and I believe the new expressway was just a few weeks away from opening when we were there, so I would have loved to have been able to comment on that, but I didn't really feel like tackling the traffic of the old road, and I've heard enough about driving in Kampala to know it wasn't something I was particularly eager to do. The traffic is supposed to be just unreal. It was actually pretty funny. We were hearing advertisements on the radio discouraging people from driving on the unfinished new highway and saying that there were severe fines for doing so. And as we were driving by the construction, we would see motorcycles cutting through the ditch and onto the construction site and using the new highway, I guess, just to avoid the traffic on the old road. I certainly wasn't bold enough to try anything like that. One of the first things I noticed is that the center line on the highway appears to just be a suggestion. Cars will cross over it when they're overtaking vehicles, but also when they're coming around a bend, they might just decide they want to use up a bit of your lane and give themselves a little more space so that they don't have to slow down as much. It can throw you off at first, but eventually you'll just get used to it and realize they can see you, they're not going to hit you, but they're going to use a bit of your lane if they feel like it. Also, there's usually pedestrians all over the side of the highway. They're just walking, going about their day. They know generally to stick off the road, but it never hurts to be cautious around pedestrians, especially children or animals. So just drive with caution, and if there's a thick crowd of pedestrians, it's best to slow down, even if no one else really is. Speaking of slowing down, sometimes you won't have a choice as you enter or exit a town, which towns are seemingly every few minutes on the highway. There's some really large speed bumps that will force you to slow down. They're much more aggressive than you'd be used to in North America or Europe, and if you don't slow down adequately, you could do some serious damage to your vehicle. There is one type of vehicle that seems to never slow down, and that's the buses. The way we were told is that they're all privately owned and competing against one another and basically racing in order to collect more fares. So they're going to pass you one way or another, so sometimes it's best to just tap the brakes and let them get around you so they don't have to do anything too dangerous. So going back to encounters with police, as you saw in the intro to my video, there are police checkpoints scattered all over Uganda. Sometimes they just wave you through, and sometimes they want to have a word with you. Our first encounter with the police was on the first day, and unfortunately I was speeding. I had missed a sign indicating the speed limit was reduced as we entered a town, and so I was still driving at highway speed even though the limit had gone down to 50. So I think they caught me doing around 70, which is unfortunate, but the officer was very friendly and professional, wasn't all upset or trying to intimidate me as a foreigner. He showed me the picture on his radar unit, which clearly indicated I was going too fast, wrote me up a ticket, had me follow him to a police station where they could finalize the ticket. They gave me instructions on how to pay it, which is that you just bring it to a bank in any town. I believe the fine was the equivalent of roughly $50 US, and everything was very professional and friendly and above board, so I had no complaints about that. I was clearly in the wrong. However, the next two times we encountered police, which was unfortunately the same police officer, he also insisted I was speeding, however couldn't produce any evidence as the previous officer had, and then it became clear very quickly what he was after, which was a bribe. Unfortunately, I have to admit I did pay him both times. I know that's very much frowned upon, but this was kind of my first situation dealing with police who were looking for a bribe, and we were in a new country and a bit intimidated, and the second time I paid him a lot less because I understood the drill, but unfortunately, yes, we did kind of feed the beast, so to say, and paid the fines, and I wish we hadn't, and hopefully next time I would be more comfortable trying to talk my way out of it. So the takeaway from that is to always be aware of what the limit is, especially if you're entering a town where the limit will almost always be reduced from the highway speed. The speed bumps are usually the reminder, but sometimes the police like to hang out in a tricky spot in order to ensure that everybody has slowed down properly. When it comes to navigation, we were pretty happy with the route suggestions that Google Maps gave us most of the time. The only tip I would give you is that if Google Maps is suggesting you take a back road in order to kind of cut across two main highways and theoretically save some time, be a bit skeptical as to whether or not that will actually materialize the way Google says it will. Sometimes the road doesn't really exist, or it isn't very obvious that it's actually a road, and you might feel a little uncomfortable driving on it. But you can, if you have the time, you can check it out because you can see some really interesting things, and we always felt safe when we were off the main highways. But if you're pressed for time or trying to make it to your accommodations before sundown, as we were, it can be a little bit anxiety-provoking trying to race against the clock on some mountain road that you don't know will actually connect to your destination. Thanks very much for watching. If you have any questions or concerns about driving to Uganda, don't hesitate to let me know in the comments. And also if you have any feedback about the video, I'd appreciate that as well. Thanks again.